last 18 months, Simon's been putting together a complete photographic record of all our dishes.
Come on, give it up, you tramp. I know what you want.
You can see an exhibition of his work at a leading off-London gallery. You're a bit of a Lord Snowdon now, aren't you, darling?
Why? Because of that thing with Princess Margaret?
What thing?
The reason I take snaps is simple. One creates these beautiful dishes. You people destroy them. The actor Hugh Laurie recently dined with us, and he was thrilled when I gave him a photo of his dessert. Because now he can look at my pudding every day.
You too can be as lucky as the actor Hugh Laurie. We've put together a quill and tassel photographic menu.
Hello, listening people.
Hello.
You're listening to Spit and Polish Presents, a televisual event. I am one of your hosts, Ryan Swinsky.
And I'm Bartek.
Bartek, we're here recording our monthly show in which we talk about a television show. As we've repeated many a times, it has been a nice little experiment and ride to do this as a monthly show during the quarantine, during the pandemic. But I gotta ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you miss the mystery box?
Oh, dude, I want to go back to it really, really, really bad.
So you're saying you don't enjoy this? Wow.
Oh, shit. I was too enthusiastic in my answer, and it made me feel like I'm not enthusiastic about something else.
Well, I put you on the chopping block here, young boy, and you have now been severed from your body. Your head is now rolling on the floor.
You can't do that, it's curfew.
So we're here doing a televisual event, and we are talking about like it says, a televisual event, a thing that was on television. This month, as one can tell by the title, we are covering the show Posh Nosh from the, mid-2000s, I want to say?
It's either 2002 or 2003.
Yeah, I wanted to say 2003. Bartek, how would you describe this show for our listening people? Just give them a quick overview of it.
So, similar to a few episodes ago when we did Double the Fist, this is the type of show where it's spoofing another type of show, but the spoof is more so used as a device to explore something different. So with Double the Fist, it was, this kind of jackass reality type show, but really it was about exploring the crazy characters behind it. This one is similar in that it's a television cooking show, but it's really exploring the relationship between the two hosts who are married.
And but also similar to, say, Police Squad, which was also satirizing an existing TV genre, which was obviously police procedurals. This is also a show about the gags. Mm-hmm. How one can implement many different types of visual as well as audio-based gags, whether they be quips or whether they be subtitles that appear on the screen, wordplay, or even a little bit of physical comedy here and there. So for our listening people, Posh Nosh is a short show, so it's British. Each episode is about 8 minutes long, usually, and there's only about 8 or 9 episodes. We'll bring up about the 8 or 9 episodes in a little bit, Bartek, but let's get into our history with this program. I suggested this, kind of knowing your background, but let's hear it.
My background is I'd never heard of it before.
Not a thing from it, right?
Not a thing.
Anything familiar from it, though?
Anything familiar?
Yeah, like anything like people or like any names pop up or anything like, or have you seen this kind of format done before or anything like that?
I recognize Richard E. Grant. He was in Spice World. We did that on the podcast. That's about it, though. I guess I haven't watched them myself, but I've seen in the background, like, cooking shows on TV.
Fair enough. So I suggested this show because of the fact that, as we've gone on with our with this monthly show, we've kind of gone to more and more obscure little shows. Well, like Police Squad was is well known, but also not many people have seen it. Double the Fist is a cult Australian show. We started off with Twin Peaks: The Return, which is a big, weird show, but it's a cult show for sure. And, and Blackadder is a big one. But as we've gone on, we've gone to more kind of smaller, weirder, more obscure, less seen shows. And I chose this because when I think of a show that no one ever talks about, or rarely people have seen, or just a weird little show, because this show, like I said, it's little. They're just little vignettes, little shorts. I always think of Posh Nosh. I've rarely ever met anyone in real life who has seen this show, and it's an anomaly, and it feels like I was the only one who saw it. It has a real attachment to me because this show was one of those programs that would air between other comedy shows on the Australian channel, the ABC. So this would be like a little 5-8 minute thing that would be in between the bigger shows, like your Summer Heights High, say. Just throwing that one out there as a big, well-known show, and in between that, or the Gruen Transfer, another show. Like, it would be one of the ones, instead of showing advertisements for other programs on that channel, they would just chuck on every now and then a little short show. They would do that for the children's hour block, they would do it for the comedy block, and this was always the one that I remembered. This was always the one that stuck with me. And I thought, Bartek, I'm pretty sure, has never even heard of this show. And I was really keen on getting you experiencing this, because this is one of those shows that I feel like you would get some appreciation out of. It's got a very British taste, and you and I like our British stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So how was it for you?
It took me a little while to get in, and it wasn't something that had me bursting out laughing, but the structure of it and the intent and the dynamic between the main characters, you nailed the word. I really appreciate it. I really admire it.
That's good to hear. Yeah, as you stated, this is a kind of spoof on a kind of comedic take on those cooking shows that we've all kind of glanced at, let alone watched, that were especially on during that time, in which it would always be like a husband and a wife, or like an old guy and an old woman and a young guy. They were always British, and they were always in their rich-to-do kitchens in their family state manor that goes back hundreds of years, and they were always like telling you how to cook this wanky food, or this food that you would never realistically make. And this is as we stated, it's a satire. It's skewering those, using that format to framework this dysfunctional marriage between the two hosts. And as the show goes on, we learn more and more about our two hosts without ever actually getting to fully delve into their background. Like, you get little hints and things appear over the course of the show.
Yeah, everything you see is still part of the show. It doesn't cut away to after or beforehand.
Exactly. And the title, Posh Nosh, obviously is a great title for this show, because they are cooking posh-related food, but when you throw in something like the word nosh, a very, colloquial term for cuisine, it also adds a clever little play on what the show's going to be about, because there's the veneer that everything's going to be posh, but at the end of the day, they're just as common as everyone else. They've got all these they've got the problems that below their station you would expect for people of this degree of eloquence. Wouldn't you agree?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the first episode begins, they even have a little tagline of extraordinary food for ordinary people, so it gives you immediately this idea of what the show's going to be about, even if you don't know too much about those kind of cooking shows you described.
Exactly right. But you're familiar with those type of cooking shows. Maybe you didn't watch them, but you understand what they're going at, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
They were just kind of around, and I don't know who, I guess it was always housewives, or people who were at home during the day that would watch those shows, because I only remember those shows existing when school holidays were on, or you were away from school when you were sick. And it's one of those things where it was all those bland shows that were on during the day that I always felt like as a kid were deterrents from staying at home. because nothing's on.
Yeah, I always think of it as like, oh, something that's playing in the back while I'm getting a haircut.
Yeah. That's really good. That's a great way to describe those shows.
It's because, you're looking at a mirror and then you can see the reflection of the TV and it's like, oh, a guy's cooking.
I think of two shows that come to mind. One of which I think this show did perhaps get something from because it's British, and the other one is an Australian cooking show, which I don't think this show got anything from, obviously, because it's Australian. But I'll go with the Australian one first. We had a show called Ready, Steady, Cook in Australia. I'm sure you remember it, Bartek.
I remember the name, yeah.
In which it was two teams, usually a husband and wife on each team, would have to cook something in the allotted time, and there was the red capsicum team and the green capsicum team, and that's not what mattered. What mattered is the host of the show for the large period of time, whose name escapes me, was very inappropriate. Whether he was actually homosexual or not, he was very touchy of the male contestants. He was always touching them. He had a kind of that typical gay lisp and inflection, and he was always making inappropriate comments, not ones that were sliding into, oh, that was a bit of a rude joke. It was always kind of, he was very much wearing his preferences on his sleeve, yet when I look into the guy, I don't know if that guy was gay or not. I don't know, but there was an uncomfortable sexual tension in the air of that show. And I loved watching Ready, Steady, Cook because I wanted to see what this guy would get away with. Like these inappropriate comments about these contestants, as well as every now and then this host would kind of give you a glimpse into his perspective as a host, he came in this day to the studio not really wanting to do this, but here he is. Like, he would just give you these little glimpses into who he actually is underneath the veneer of a host, which this show does. This is one of the main jokes of Posh Nosh, is they're having the veneer that they're these eloquent hosts, but they can't really contain their contempt for one another, as well as the show's format, as well as the audience.
Yeah, I think now that you describe Ready, Steady, Cook, I think I remember you either telling me all this stuff or you showing me like a compilation video.
I think I did both.
Yeah, well, yeah, you would do that, yeah.
And the other show was, I can't remember which way around it was, but it was something like The Cook and the Chef, in which it was a younger, 30-something-year-old, blue-collar, Cockney guy who's a really good cook, and he's teamed up with an old, crusty, eloquent lady who's a chef, and they had this great dynamic of old and young, and they really both respected each other, but it was the chalk and cheese kind of aspect of it, where the show never really played too heavy into his Cockney lower class kind of way, because the show was still, British upper crusty in its way, so there was a bit of a conflict of interest there, and I don't know if Posh Nosh got from that, but I always think of that because that was a show that was also 10 minutes long in itself, and it would just be in between shows, so I always kind of associate the two, because I always wanted ABC to play an episode of Posh Nosh in the time bracket that show was on, because, oh boy.
Maybe that show is the parody one, and this was the real one.
This is the real one. You said it took you a little while to get into it. Is it because of the dry comedy stylings, or did you not really know that this was a comedy show? What was your thing that took you a little while to warm up to it?
I think it was just the comedy styling. Once it got going and I, understood it and I knew what I was in for, then it was fine.
That's fair. I remember very vividly when I watched this show as a child. My mum and I were watching it. My dad was out in the kitchen, and he came out and he's like, "Why the hell are you guys watching a cooking show?" Because we never watched those kind of shows. And we were telling him, no, Dad, you got to see this show. It's not what it appears to be. And yeah, it's not. So let's kind of delve deeper into Posh Nosh. So did you like the show?
I did like the show.
What about it? What about it did you like?
I liked how well it explored the two characters that it has, who the names actually escape me of the characters. One's Minty, the other
Simon.
is Simon. Minty and Simon. So Simon, he's from a very wealthy family, and Minty was from middle class but married into his family.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole show, one of the big jokes that it is revolved around is the fact that Simon is very clearly repressing homosexuality.
Yes.
And he shows a lot of, I guess, contempt or
Hatred?
hatred or disinterest in a lot of things that Minty is doing. And she has this very sort of like, oh, okay, well, I'll just cheer up this situation a little bit with some quick thinking and funny ways of phrasing things. And the consistency of that, like, even if it wasn't making me laugh out loud, was reinforcing those characters, and I thought that was a really neat thing.
Yeah, that is one of the pivotal jokes, is the dysfunction of their marriage is in many different facets. It's obviously the big one being he's obviously got homosexual tendencies, whether he may be bisexual by today's standards, but they're definitely leaning towards he has love affairs. He's not interested in her at all. It's kind of like a marriage of convenience sake, and she's aware of it. But she does the British thing where she just keeps smiling, and you just gotta, keep calm and carry on and just push through and everything will be okay. It's microaggression, the show.
Yeah, that's a good way of describing it.
It's microaggressions upon microaggressions, and they keep getting bigger and bigger. Like, eventually, Richard E. Grant's character gets drunker and drunker and drunker until, like, one episode, like the whole episode, he's absolutely hammered.
Yeah, and in the last episode, he's just straight up getting over his lover's death.
You mean his tennis coach?
His tennis coach.
Yeah, and I haven't seen this show in a while. It's been a while. Like, I know it's been on YouTube, which is where we watched it, because I tried to track down a copy of it in any other form, but it's one of those shows like Double the Fist where I guess it doesn't have a huge enough appeal where distribution of it is as easily and readily available, which is unfortunate. I think that it would be a great little show to put on an official YouTube channel, say, and or have it on something like a Netflix, in which you just have it as one of those little shows that pop up. But we watched it on YouTube, and I haven't seen it in a while. I've probably watched it about like 7-8 years ago. But I really appreciated it more on this watching of it. I really picked up on a lot of the jokes and a lot of the ongoing continuity that they had in the episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Just little things that kept building upon, like his dog.
Yeah.
His replacement child.
They delve very heavily into that idea.
One of the other aspects of the dysfunction of their marriage is that class struggle, which is, as it obviously would be present because Posh is in the title. Like you said, she came from a middle-class background originally, and she's kind of a nouveau riche kind of character, while he's like old school. Like, his family has lived in this house for like how many centuries was it? Like, I can't remember if it was like 300 or 600 years. And the house was made for them by a king or something. And so there's obviously a divide between them on that level too, because he knows how to pronounce all these foreign words and she doesn't.
Yeah, that's true. And every time she refers to his mother / her mother-in-law, it's always lady.
And always horrific, the details of what you hear about who that woman was. My favorite one of the stories about the mother-in-law was when Minty just casually mentions, like, when she, like, one of the first times she interacted with her, the mother-in-law called her like a lazy slut. Like,
oh yeah, because of the means by which she prepared one part of a meal.
and she says it with such like, oh, that was so funny.
She called me silly, but she called me lazy slut.
What do you So just to go further, did you have any? Did you have a favorite episode of this? An episode that stood out to you? A short, one of them, because there's a few that stand out to me. But what about you, first time viewer and all?
It's a little tricky since they're all so short and it's so running together. But I guess because it had a very notable running gag throughout the whole thing with an interesting payoff. The one where they emphasized "and" in it, which was butter and
Yeah.
the title escapes me, but what was it?
Butter pudding.
No. It was the
bread
one
and
where
bread and butter
bread
pudding.
and butter. Yeah.
Bread and butter pudding, which is what they became famous for, because in the story they own like a famous restaurant. Was it the Quill and Tassel or something?
Yeah.
And that's why they have this show, because they're so renowned that they get to have this cooking show in which they teach us, the common plebs, how to be like them.
Yeah, and the big emphasis thing there, because Simon's whole thing is insistence on like this is how you pronounce it, is you don't say you don't just say the word "and" without thinking. You have to really emphasize it. This is how he has his prestigious way of doing this food. And then at the very end, he has a line that's something like, and we change the face of bread and butter forever. And then, because throughout the whole episode he was correcting his wife on how to pronounce it, she corrects him, and then he just says completely straight, yes, that's what they changed it to. Just showing like the level of understanding he has, that like when he does it wrong, it's intentional.
Yeah, I completely get it. That episode's great. My personal favorite was the leftovers episode, when they were teaching us how to make leftovers,
Yeah.
and from fresh ingredients, how to cook leftovers. And I loved when she made like I can't remember what exactly it was, but that giant thing of bread, and he's like, no.
Yeah.
And he just starts like ripping it apart and making it look shit.
Yeah, you can't have it be perfect, because then that's not leftovers.
Exactly right. And I love just that one in particular, the sincerity that they're playing this, the straightness of their performances and of the script and of the jokes. Like that one in particular, if someone walked in not knowing that this wasn't a comedy show, obviously there's lots of gags, but the straight-faced nature of them approaching the silly idea of how to make leftovers from fresh ingredients, how to cook and make leftovers, something that has the appearance of it. That was, for me, the highlight episode, because it really took this formula, this structure, this idea of their cooking show, and really had a great comedic tour de force through it. There's just this notion of them bickering, too, over how to make leftovers. Wonderful stuff. So you said you're familiar with Richard E. Grant. Is it just Spice World, or is there other things that you've witnessed him in? Because he's one of those actors that's in everything.
Maybe there was something else, but I just mainly remember him from Spice World, and even his name just like rings a bell. Like, oh yeah, we did have an episode where we talked about Richard E. Grant.
Yeah. What did you think about him in this? Because in Spice World, he doesn't get to be in the spotlight as much, and he's still an over-the-top character in this, but he's he's different in this than, say, Spice World, where he's like a yuppie manager type. What did you think of him in this?
Yeah, he really nailed his character. His reactions to lines, comedic timing with his co-host. Yeah, everything was just really well done. Like, little lines where she asks him, like, oh, where would you be without me? And then without skipping a beat, he just goes, Mykonos.
I have to say that this is what I think of Richard E. Grant. Like, whenever I see him, I always think of this. I can rarely ever take him in a serious role, because I always think of him as this. And whenever I see him in real life, doing interviews and his social media and all of that, he comes across as, obviously, he comes across like this, but not in a negative fashion. He just because he's he's a very well-to-do, eloquent kind of upper crusty figure type, and I always think of this performance of his. It's just so well realized and so well performed, and I can't think of anyone else who could have played this role. Like, that's how good he is in this role. I can't think of a single other person that could have honed it down. It's just an amazing performance. I think it's one of those great overlooked comedy performances.
Yeah, once you see it done this way, you don't really see it any other way.
And of course, she's great too. Minty, who I believe wrote the show, was one of the head writers of the show. She's great too. I haven't seen her in anything else myself.
Me neither.
I looked her up. She's in the Fast show, which is like a sketch show, which is very big in the UK, but it's not one that I've seen. So I've only seen her in this. And boy, she's great too. It's kind of hard to pick a favorite from the two of them. I think for me it's Simon, just because of how much of a like a little prat he is, just how much he vocalizes his disdain. Like, she does the great job of being the straight person in the comedy, because she has to keep the veneer of normalcy. But he doesn't, and I think that appeals to me, is just the fact that he doesn't abide by the rules, yet he's the one that enforces them as well. It's very funny to me.
Yeah. I was actually thinking the same thing, like, oh man, it's kind of hard to pick who the better character, or who your favorite character is, because, yeah, he is obviously the one that does all the silliest stuff, the most crazy stuff, but then the way that she performs it and the things that she has to do obviously is a bit more restrained, but it perfectly complements the silly performance of Richard E. Grant in this.
But in all fairness to her, I would say she has the more absurdist kind of humor in the show, because Richard E. Grant's humor is very typical British. He's a repressed British upper crusty man who has microaggressions, but she's getting this absurdist humor because she's doing the cooking show, but they're throwing weird stuff in there without ever acknowledging it, such as her vocabulary.
Yeah, her synonyms
for cooking, and they never ever really highlight it. Like, it's one of those things where it throws you off, because she says it so casually, as if this is the correct terminology, and it just starts layering on top of each other more and more and more, and she just plays it so straight-laced. But at first, she used a phrase, and you go, oh, okay, oh, maybe that is a phrase, but then she keeps using more of them. And I think she gets kind of the really absurdist humor in that, while Richard E. Grant kind of gets the more typical British humor. She gets to have, like, the weird wordplay.
Yeah, his is stuff that, like, would try to make you laugh. Hers is one where it's like, what?
How did you react to her stuff when it came to that? Because it's straight off the bat, too. It's not like in a second episode, like in the very first episode, she just starts saying, like, you've got to humiliate your vegetables.
Yeah, I had the exact same thing you described there at first, because I don't know too much about all the cooking terminology, but I think I have heard things that are, like, similar to that, but actually are real, so I was kind of thinking, like, is annoy a cooking term? Like, because maybe it's like irritate, like you have to irritate it, but yeah, it's... And then as it kept going, I obviously realized, like, okay, that's the running joke, her synonyms or vocabulary.
I think that she was watching one of these cooking shows, and I bet you, because I think the first thing that she uses it for, instead of strain the vegetables, which is a real term, I think she saw that on a cooking show, and she thought it would be one of the two writers, thought it'd be really funny if you changed the word strain to something like a synonym of it. Like, wouldn't it be funny if instead of they use the word strain, they use the word like annoy or humiliate or, stress. And like stress is also a term, right? And it just kept building off of that. It became more and more absurd.
Yeah, I think in one of the descriptions I read for the show, and it listed examples, it mentioned, like, one of the word that you would use is like boil, or you'd boil this. And then obviously boil, that can mean like enrage, so something to do with anger.
Yeah, annoy. And I love that level of straight-faced absurdity within it because it's obviously funny, but she's never winking at the camera when she does it. She only winks at the camera when when her character makes a lame joke that is obviously funny because of how terrible the joke is at hand. Did with her stuff, what were some other aspects of her humor or comedy stylings that character brought that you enjoyed? Because obviously we'll talk about Richard E. Grant some more, but he's so enticing. I just want to kind of really highlight her because Richard E. Grant is so mesmerizing in this performance, but she's really talking. She's doing most of the stuff in the show. A lot of Richard E. Grant is him leaving.
Yeah, she's actually doing the TV show.
Yeah. What was other things that she did that you really enjoyed?
Yeah, the moments where Richard E. Grant would be in like the background playing with the dog or whatever, where she would just like sometimes, just whenever she would talk about her life being married to him or the wedding, like she'd talk about how like, oh, I got this from his mum, but I know I was actually from the maid. There, when she's showing the wedding photo and the dog's there, she talks about how sometimes she feels like she's the one who's being left out of stuff. And yeah, just these little genuine moments, but like mini moments, because you have to get back to the cooking show, just adding this layer of depth to the character.
Yeah, she does a brilliant job of that. It's although they're both cartoon characters, just how straight-faced that they play them. And with her in particular, there's a genuine nature to her character because you get the feeling as the show goes on that she's not this type of person really. Like this is something she's adopted because of the marriage and because of, the circumstances of whatever her life has been up to this point. But you kind of get the feeling from just her performance that she's tired of it, but this is what she is now.
Yeah, there's that episode where I can't remember which one it was, but she was setting up a plate with like a fish and lemons and stuff, and Simon was telling her like, oh no, you should put the lemon here, no there, and then at the end she says something like, that's where it started, and that was, I think, part of the facade being broken in that example.
Yeah, she was so annoyed.
Yeah, and then there are other instances where if there's a running joke of Simon correcting her, like with the pronunciation of paella, and then at the end she tries to say rice in a weird way, but no, it's an English word.
No, it's an English word.
Yeah, eventually it does get to the point where she gets a little bit fed up with it.
But Bartek, it's not jus, it's jus.
Yeah, in terms of the subtitles, that was one of the ones that really got me, like, jus, and then in brackets prawn, jus, just the word again.
My favorite use of the subtitles was when she said, and you've got to cook this 4 minutes. And then the word for, not the number, like not the word for the number, but FOR comes up 4 minutes. So if you're reading it, you go, oh, you got to cook this 4 minutes. Okay.
I missed that one, but that's good.
That one's a great one. And I just love also ones where it's in slow-mo and then it'll come up with like, this is not the speed, this is not the accurate
not real-time speed.
Like, you didn't know that? I really liked with her, when she did try to fluster up that upper crusty nature. One of my favorite lines from her very early on, I think it's in the very first episode, is, now, you can use stock cubes. You don't have to make your own stock. You can use stock cubes if you have low self-esteem. I love those type of lines. Those just scathing kind of condescension lines that are just so judgmental. I love those kind of lines, and she had so many brilliant ones like that. There was a line, I can't remember if it was her or him, but another famous line that I loved was, cooking really upsets food. Just the absurdity of it. It's just brilliant humor, and like you said, it took you a little while to get into it. Is it just because it was so dry?
No, well, yeah, there was the dryness, but also it was me understanding the point of the show.
I'm trying to think with her. She also had. I love when she had to remind us that food was organic. Always,
Yeah,
it's like 4 or 5 times it's crammed into like a 3-word sentence.
I think the joke that finally settled it for me, like, oh, okay, I get the show now, is in the first episode, she talks about like, oh, this is what you do with the oven when you prepare this food, and then she says, and if you don't have an oven, and then she just doesn't follow up on that because she doesn't know what to say.
Oh, it is great. Like I love my wife Rachel watched this with me. She had seen the first few episodes when I watched it back in the day, but not all of them. And she lost her mind. I think it's in the very first episode. They introduced this brand of water that they've made where it's a mix of still and sparkling water called Starkling water.
Mm-hmm.
And Rachel lost her mind because she was like, "Oh my god, that's a thing now. Like that's a type of water you can get now." But back then, it probably wasn't. It was a joke. It was a joke in this show that is now reality. Isn't that great?
Yeah, it's interesting that Posh Nosh influenced humanity.
I think it's changed the world.
I meant to say reality, but humanity. Let's go with that.
It's changed everything.
Mm.
But yeah, she does a great job, and you feel like she does a great job where you feel sorry for her, but you also don't because she's also a prick that you don't like. Like she's a horrible person, but also you do feel sorry for her situation. And this is all in like 8-minute segments. Let's talk about the Richard E. Grant in the room. Did you have a favorite moment from like a real gutbuster belly laugh? And in general, did you have a favorite joke that you haven't talked about?
I remember in, I think, either the first or second episode, the second episode, because it was the one about the birthday party when he was talking about chocolate. He was talking about this one guy who's in like a hospital ward somewhere who revolutionized chocolate. And after he said his name, he just said, "Write to him and tell him he's a genius." And the way he delivered that line had so much authority in it. And then immediately after, like, the subtitles told you, like, his room number in the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah, probably a line that I've used in my real life to describe things, and I swear you've probably heard me do this, and he describes a certain fish as the cashew of fish. And I've used that as a moniker of quality for other things in life, like, oh, that's the cashew of this. And I just love that. It's like you said, he nails it because as over the top as he can be, he delivers it with that Shakespearean actor quality, that great comedic performers like him and Patrick Stewart. They come from a classical background. They come from a background where they are in those period piece dramas, and you know them for being this. But when they do comedy, they bring that element to it, even if they're playing it up to 11, which he clearly is. But there's just something about, like when you said before, that line about how he wants to be in Mykonos, and just the way he says it too, brings a level of humor to it that a more, directly comedic performer may have not had that charm to it. Because we've talked about that before on our podcast of sometimes, there are lesser comedies because they have the performer, they're just like some comedian and they're just playing it like it's an out and out comedy, while sometimes the humor comes best from people who are playing it straight like it's a drama. Like we talked about that with Paleface, right? Where in the film Paleface with Bob Hope, he's the only one that's like an out and out comedian who's playing this like a comedy, and everyone else is playing it like a serious Western, and that's what makes the movie even funnier. Richard E. Grant here, he's absurd, but he's playing this as if this is a weird, sad, tragic gay story in the background. Like, he could have his own movie about being a repressed gay Englishman, but it's in this silly show.
The show's long enough to be a movie, I reckon.
It's just like over an hour or so.
Yeah, 8 episodes, 9 minutes each? Yeah, 72 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah, a favorite Richard E. Grant line that I had was from the very first episode when he was describing, I believe, I want to say it was a wine or it could have been oil because he pallets oils like he does wines, which was, I don't know how you felt about that, but it was gross.
Yeah, that's true. It was about the virgin taste.
It's like sucking nectar through a hangman's noose was his description of something, and I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know where they came up with that line, because we have often talked about, like, there's those jokes or those crazy situations where you go, oh, where did they get that one from? But really, you exaggerate that for effect when you're talking about comedy. It's like, oh, that's a crazy idea. I don't know who came up with, like, where that came from. But
Oh,
that
that was
statement, I don't
yeah,
know where that came from.
yeah, that was a big running joke of yours when we started Unappreciated Masterpieces. Like, someone wrote this.
Someone wrote that line, and it's amazing. I don't know what, like, lightning bolt struck their house that day, but that line is just so out of left field. Because I don't know what it means, but it makes me laugh.
Yeah, it's like you're sucking out of a
Hangman's
rope.
noose.
Yeah, a rope that's absorbed some nectar, I guess.
Yeah, this is, short-lived show. Obviously, it only has a certain type of shelf life to it, but I think that's the strength of the show. It's short, it's sweet, it doesn't overstay its welcome, and it gets to the point. And it's just there to be fun. And I personally think it achieves that goal. You?
Yeah, I'd say so.
It didn't bother you that the episodes, like, we've been mainly covering your more normal standard show fare where each episode's like 25 minutes or half an hour or an hour. This is the first type of one where these are just a series of shorts.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel about that? And do you engage with those type of shows often?
I found it refreshing, like you said, it gets straight to the point. It doesn't overstay its welcome, and you can binge watch them very easily if you are if you want more of it. 8 episodes, and there's so many lines similar to Police Squad. There is a sort of a rewatch bonus in that you might pick up on some lines that you missed, because even before I watched the show, you were telling me that this is another one where you really got to pay attention, because if something funny happens, they're not going to dwell on it very much. They're just going to move on.
Yeah.
So it's a show that has rewatch value.
And that's good to hear because, you and I have different tastes, obviously being different people. And there was a part of me where I was like, will Bartek just be kind of like, oh, that was a nice oddity, but I will never really want to watch it again kind of thing. Because it does have a really dry sensibility and it plays it in that straight-faced way that could be a little bit like, one, you could not, I can understand people who wouldn't like this show or get what the show's point is, but also, like, when it comes to, like, that rewatch factor, I could see, because it is so short, it gets straight to the point, and it's kind of you could argue, a one-note kind of comedy show, like it hits that same beat. That it may not have that rewatchability factor for you, but I'm glad to hear that it kind of does have that, and maybe one day down the future, you'll go back to visit Posh Nosh.
Yeah, especially since, like I mentioned, it took me a little while to get into it. There are probably a bunch of gags in the first few minutes of the first episode that would have completely gone over my head because I was still gauging what the show was.
What I like too about the show is I can't think of any negatives. It achieves what it wants to achieve effortlessly. There's no jokes that I would say are bad. There are ones that make you laugh more than others, and like you said, there's a lot of that, I appreciate this, but I think that's the point, right? And what it's spoofing, what it's satirizing, it nails. Like, we haven't even talked about how great the opening sequence is, the credits at the beginning and end, and how, for me, having seen these shows in the background and having viewed them, it perfectly encapsulates what those shows are like. Just the credits.
Yeah, all the two characters in like different environments, like as if this is their day to day, and then you got that one shot where they're walking towards the camera and they go separate ways to go around the camera. And I might be wrong, but I could have sworn that like Minty has like a strange reaction to that, like, oh, I have to go a different way. But upon watching future episodes, I'm like, oh, maybe I was just imagining that.
I
Yeah.
also love it shows you the dysfunction in their dynamic, because she's there slavishly cooking in the kitchen and he's out there just drinking wine, just enjoying himself with his big hat on. And
Yes, well, he he can't drink wine during the show, Ryan.
well, and I love the
Oh wait,
music
no, that's one of
too.
the running gags.
And
Yeah,
I
the
love
music.
the music where you can kind of barely understand what the hell the words are saying in the song.
Yeah, it's like Blackadder 2 credits.
Yeah, like you have to have a good ear to pick up all the words to it, which I appreciate, because it kind of just is, the music is in tone with what those kind of shows are, but there's a silly aspect without the lyrics being overly comedic and silly, like, oh, it's one of those ones, but they got silly lyrics, where this one is just dialed into the silliness enough for those people to take this at face value. That's another strength of this show that I personally love, is the idea of people seeing this not knowing what it is and trying to take it at face value, and like, how long does it take for most people to realize the illusion?
Yeah, especially if they're like waiting for another show to start, because you said this is something that happens between shows.
Yeah. When I watched it, yeah, and it is an interesting conundrum. Like, I love that shows that do that, or videos that do that. Like, YouTube has really embraced that kind of quality of making a type of video where you think it's going to be one thing, and then it slowly turns into another. The most iconic kind of example of that is Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you think it's going to be one of those old school British shows where it's got like the puppets and everybody's happy, and then it turns into a nightmare world. This doesn't go as over and beyond as that, but that type of humor has really evolved towards the internet, where I would say to you, like, do you think that Posh Nosh, like, now, do you think it like holds up to where comedy is at, and how this kind of form, like I've just said, this kind of show would exist just on someone's YouTube channel now, not on the BBC?
Mm-hmm.
How do you think it holds up?
Yeah, I guess one of the immediate questions is, like, would this be something that appeals mainly to people that do like British comedy, or would it be more wide-reaching? Because yeah, there is... It really does have that British atmosphere about it, which not everyone likes, but there is a lot of wit and intricacies that I feel like a lot of people who maybe wouldn't even like British comedies might describe it as something of like, you know, give it some time and you'll really get into it. So yeah, it's an interesting question. I feel like maybe it would work.
I think so. I think it's kind of like, in a weird, inadvertent way, kind of a pioneering step to where internet comedy is, because I can see Posh Nosh, the way it is, just the way it's presented right now, being a liked comedy series on a YouTube channel. And that's not saying that this show didn't belong on television. I mean, it's really well made. It's playing straight into what those shows were like at the time, and those shows can still continue to be now. But yeah.
Yeah, you'd want it to be on the medium that it's parodying.
Yeah, but I think it does hold up. I think it has some, there are some dated jokes here in terms of like technology and whatever, but the essence of the show comedically still hits true. And I think this has like a long-lasting effect, although I don't think that this show was seen by enough people. I was looking up beforehand, like on the internet, people talking about this show, having talked about this show, and it's like it is in real life, not as talked about as I would like.
Yeah, when I was looking it up, there were very few things talking about it. 2 websites that I went to even had like the same description of the show.
And I was trying to look up any behind-the-scenes information, because I was curious of, like, how did this come into being? like, I guess the lead actress is from a sketch comedy show that's well liked, so she's worked on several projects, and I guess this is just something that she got to make, or that people got to make. But I'm just so curious of like where this all came from, because with shows like Police Squad and Double the Fist, we know where those shows came from because they have the information readily available and you can get where they came from. But Posh Nosh is just such a oddity to me, because I know in my brain I could figure out, like, obviously they're making fun of these shows, but I don't know how it got made and how Richard E. Grant got involved, and like,
It doesn't have its Naked Gun.
no, it doesn't. It doesn't. And with Police Squad, it was very obvious as to why, because they had made Airplane beforehand, right? So, cool. But I don't know with Posh Nosh. I would love to know the behind-the-scenes story of how this all came to be and the making of it, because I think there could be something very interesting there, because this just seems like a fun little side project for everyone.
Yeah, that's true.
And I'm always interested in hearing the stories of those kind of projects where you got all these people involved that were worked on this thing, but it was just kind of like a little fun side thing that everyone was doing. And because to me, it has the air of that this was a fun thing to make. Everyone seems to be having fun. It has that atmosphere and just in its delivery, that this was just kind of like the BBC just commissioned these little shorts, and it kind of feels like they had free reign over it, and they just kind of got to do whatever they want, because there are some really, really dark jokes in this show.
Yeah, like what you said about how it could work as like on a YouTube channel. This feels like something someone would have made. I guess that it leads into that idea from the fact that it does feel like, things that you would put on YouTube, your YouTube channel, are things that you are proud of. It's not so much something that you did as work. So, yeah, this feels like, a project that we had fun on. This is something that we would put out there and show people. And yeah, being a smaller scale show, you wouldn't really do a smaller scale show like that without much justification beyond like personal investment.
Yeah, and there seems to be an air too of like this was like a little industry fun thing, because there's barely any other actors involved, and the ones that are involved are either now bigger stars or they were like well known in the comedy scene comedians that would turn up as like the Bishop guy. Or there's an episode where they show pictures of the patrons at their restaurant, and they're all like those comedians that you see on those panel shows like QI or Would I Lie to You kind of thing. So there's obviously like that level of it as well that I personally I enjoyed seeing. I enjoyed seeing someone like David Tennant in the show as the tennis coach, and then the other tennis coach. How did you feel about that they just never really acknowledge, like they do acknowledge it, but they don't, that David Tennant plays two people who aren't related, but
Yeah, it was a funny gag.
I just is because it just shows you that Simon has a type, and that type is David Tennant. Because you're not familiar with David Tennant as an actor that much, I would assume.
No, I've heard his name thrown about because people love Doctor Who, but I know that he's a big deal.
Yeah, he's a bigger deal now. Yeah, you never saw that Fright Night remake?
No, I haven't.
I reckon you would enjoy that. He plays like the expert on vampires and whatnot in that movie, and he's very fun.
I've seen Centurions too.
And of course, you've seen Saint Trinians too, The Legend of Fritton's Gold.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this film, this is just fun, and it was really great to see David Tennant. As I mentioned earlier in the show, 8 or 9 episodes. This is how elusive the show is. You go to look up how many episodes there are, and IMDb says there's 9, but the 9th episode has literally no description, no nothing in comparison to the other episodes. It has a title, but nothing. Nothing about it is mentioned. You go to Wikipedia, and it says 8. It doesn't even mention this 9th episode. And then you go to different forums and people arguing, there's 9 episodes. No, there are 8 episodes. And then on YouTube, you can only find 8. I don't know what the answer is. I even looked up the DVD specs, and on the DVD that used to be sold here in Australia, it had 8. But the one in the UK, I think, had 9. So I don't know what the answer is.
Wow, this whole episode you've been saying 8 or 9. I'm just being like, there's 8, Ryan. I watched 8 episodes, but okay, there's a reason for that then.
Yeah. I didn't want to worry you straight off the bat by being like, you didn't watch all of them, but like 8 or 9, because there's a weird... And this is a part of the mystery of the show of, why did this get made? What happened to it after it got made? Like, it seems like it was just like a can of soda. You cracked it open, it fizzled, and then it just, went flat. All the bubbles went away real quick. And I love the show, but like I said, distribution is, I don't know what's happening with that. Like, I can't find it on anything. So YouTube's the only place I can. And then I don't even know how many episodes there are. I know nothing about it other than what it is. Like, just looking at it. And in the age that we are now, Bartek, isn't something like that fascinating to you? Because we live in the age of information where you can just tweet the people who created this show and ask them questions. And I tried that. They didn't answer me. But isn't that interesting to you when you still have a show like this that will just pop up somewhere and there's like, you don't know anything about what it is outside of just what it presents to you in the show itself?
Yeah, it's a neat thing about mysteries in the information age when you just cannot find an answer.
Yeah, and it's always interesting when it's kind of this level of prestige, right? Because this is not that old. It has well-known people involved, and it's on a mainstream channel. Yeah, don't know jack shit about it. It just tickles my mystery bone. I'm just like, I just want to know. This isn't like the rise and fall of Baal level of mystery, but it does tickle my interest. Trying to think. Anything else you want to talk about with Posh Nosh? Did you have any negatives of the show? Because, like I said, I just said I didn't. But what about you, first-time viewer and all?
Yeah, putting aside the fact that took me a second to get into, I think it nails everything it tried to do. I can't really say it does have negatives. I guess maybe you could say that the fact that I didn't laugh too much would be a thing. But again, like you said, appreciation does kind of feel like its intent.
Did you not get any big laughs at all? At any points? Or?
Yeah, I mean, just small giggles from like lines I wasn't expecting.
Yeah. I lost it when he was like, "That's it! No more food, just sauce!" And he had his whole diatribe about how we're just gonna serve nothing but sauce. I've seen the future and it's sauce!
There was one episode where I can't remember the exact context, but Minty was talking about how, or one of them was mentioning that, like, they would wake up in the middle of the night, and then they mentioned, and they didn't dwell on it, that they'd run to the other's room, which just indicates, they sleep in separate rooms.
They had lots of things like that. Like, I liked that there was literally, I think, one time you heard whoever was behind the camera react to something, which is when Simon says some line about it's as refreshing like a young schoolboy or something.
Oh, the Italian language student?
Yeah, he has some line that is basically, and he's supposed to be like young school days or whatever, but he says boys.
Best enjoyed young.
Best enjoyed young, like a young schoolboy. Like he has, it's very off-putting, and it's like the one time you hear like another person, because she's elsewhere, and you just hear a person react, going, "Excuse me." And he just brushes through it. He just keeps going. I love it. Even down to wordplay. Lots of funny wordplay, but down to, there's an episode called like Sauce or Sauces, right? And the joke is like they're making sauces and they're all absurd, but what's Simon in that episode? Completely drunk. He's on the sauce. Isn't that good?
Mm-hmm.
That's
yeah.
It's clever. It's nice. Any further thoughts or things you want to mention about Posh Nosh?
Yeah, just one more. So we mentioned that Simon, he shows a lot of contempt for his wife and disrespect. And like halfway through the show, obviously I understood that. But then the show would sometimes like throw me for a little bit of a loop where it kind of shows that maybe he is actually fond of her, but his whole attitude towards her is kind of contrary to that. It's weird. Like, there was the episode where at the end he would talk about how, like, oh, you had that really funny saying, say it. And I know it was followed up with one that's like, oh, no, there was another saying that wasn't as good, but like, there felt like a kind of like a genuineness there. And on the other hand, like in the final episode, Minty, when she introduced him to the other David Tennant, even though it was like, a continuation of, his cheating or his engaging in his repression, she had this sort of like smile on her face when he sat next to him that almost seemed like, yeah, this is the way it's meant to be.
Because
so like kind of gives
she's aware.
It kind of gives you this this like kind of extra level of like how messed up their relationship is. That like they're sort of in a way happy together.
Well, that's how dysfunctional relationships do work, right? You have those moments that lull you into thinking that everything's good. So yeah, Simon will have his moments of being slightly nice, but he will still find a way of turning that against her. And I think he thinks of her more as a business partner. He likes her as a business partner. But as a wife, as a person, no, he likes the dog more. And they can't have children because he can't stand the smell of them.
I guess the more poignant moment is the Minty one, because that's literally how the show ends. So like, there's a 9th episode, I guess.
Mystery 9th, yeah.
Yes, but the 8th episode ends being like, the story is now over, and Minty actually does like the situation. It's just like, oh, clap your hands, look how messed up they are.
But also at the same time, there is the visual language too of, but she's all alone on the other side of the table, eating the meal that she's made, and they're not even touching theirs. Yeah,
that's true.
There's that kind of stuff there that's really good storytelling. See, it's a silly little comedy show that's 5 to 8 minutes long, but it has, it uses the language of the visual medium to really enforce those kind of themes and ideas that the show has been banging over your head since the very beginning, but it's really well done. I don't think I have much else to say about Posh Nosh. It is a wonderful show that you can all watch easily on YouTube. It's a quick, easy watch. I love this show because there is a level of reverence I have for it, because it's one of those things where it feels like only I have seen it. I'm sure you have something in your life that you have a fondness for because it's something that you feel like only you have experienced, and we all have something like that, and then you bestow this, like it's you bestowing a gift onto others when you go, hey, have this and experience it. And that's how I feel about Posh Nosh. It's just like double the fist. It's one of those things where I feel like not many people have seen it, and I was lucky to have seen it at that time in my life, and I've adopted many things from it just casually, and I felt like we should talk about it because no one's talking about Posh Nosh. But I just talking about wrapping up thoughts, definitely recommend the show. I think it has aged well, and I think it adds a interesting perspective into the landscape of how these short comedy things work now, especially in the age of the internet. I could easily see them bringing back Posh Nosh as a YouTube thing. Like, if they wanted to do it again and come back to these characters these 15 or so years later, I could easily see them doing that. Just a little short thing on a YouTube channel. I could see that being done. It would be fun. Richard E. Grant, come on, do it again. He seems like a fun guy. Bartek, final thoughts, and if you would recommend?
I do recommend this show, and I hope it came across in this episode that we did, but it's the kind of show that you can't really spoil without just reading out the full script. Like, the format of the show and the appeal of it is seeing the execution. You can't really spoil the execution in a podcast like this. So yeah, we just chatted about all this stuff, and that probably won't diminish your experience all that much. It's definitely a fun show to check out. Might take you a bit, might not, but yeah, you'll have... You might be able to appreciate it if you look in the right areas.
Indeed. It's, as Minty said, it's nicely nice.
Nice.
So many good lines. Do you think you could cook any of the foods they made with the way that they taught you how?
This might be a cheap answer, but maybe leftovers? I don't think I'd be able to do it perfectly.
You'll need an Aga oven, though.
Ah, shit. And if I don't have an oven, silence.
No, I think it does work on that level too. Of if you strip away all the silliness, I think that you can make these foods. I think it works on that level as well. But yeah, you know what I also wish too, Bartek? Because again, lack of conversation. I would love a flowchart of all the different synonyms she used and what they matched, because there was a rule to it. Like, she would keep using the same phrases for the same activities. So she didn't just change disappoint the veg when she did something to humiliate. Like, she would have, when you're doing something, she would have a specific word. I wish that someone could detail down what each word was representative of.
Mm-hmm.
Someone do that. I would very much appreciate it. But that's it for Posh Nosh. A fun journey back for me, and I'm glad that you enjoyed yourself, Bartek, and I'm just happy that I got to share this show with you. This and Double the Fist in particular, ones that I'm very happy to have shared and experienced with you.
It was good. The episode was good too.
Thank you.
No, sorry, no, that's the thing we say after the episode. Damn.
Yeah, that, and all right, that's the episode. Like, that's how you end it. Listening people, you can find us on the social medias of Facebook and Twitter. Look up Spit and Posh Presents, you shall find us. Our email is spitandpolished@gmail.com. Feel free to email us with your thoughts, questions, queries. Have you seen Posh Nosh? What are your thoughts on it? Did you work on it? If you did, contact us. We'd love to hear some of the details of how this all came to be and what it's all like and what happened after and all of that. That'd be interesting. So spitandpolished@gmail.com, and rate, review us on all the podcatchers. Listen to us on all of them as well, just every single one. Like, you listen to this episode like 50 million times because you're going through each podcatcher one at a time. Or play our episode on all the podcatchers at the same time. Get it all synced up. It'll be a fun time.
Yeah, on loop.
On a loop. Bartek, a pleasure as usual, I guess, you lazy slut.
Thank you, you... Hold on, let me just... What's another funny line I haven't mentioned? Let's see. No hips, no bosom.
That was a good one. It's like he's wearing a yellow hat. Now it's like he's
Better
wearing
than God's wee-wee.
Like, yellow as God's wee-wee was a good one. It's like now he's wearing a yellow hat on his arse. Until next time, listening people, remember, you can taste if meat was happy.